It is happening, Namazu. The entirety of Final Fantasy XIV is going inside here. And Squeenix was cool enough to send us all the interviews with Yoshi P and everything else long before it got public. So let's take a look at what we know.
ファイナルファンタジー14は次なる10年に向けてさらなる挑戦として今回モバイル版の開発を発表させていただきました。こちらはファイナルファンタジー14本体をモバイル用に完全アレンジしたモバイルデバイス用の最新 MMORPG です。アレンジとはいえですね、ストーリーやバトルコンテンツなどその再現には、ものすごい情熱と品質、それらを追求してライトスピードスタジオの皆さんが献身的に開発をしてくださっています。すでにファイナルファンタジー14をプレイしている皆さんも、そしてこれからファイナルファンタジー14の物語に触れてくださる皆さんも、ぜひぜひ今後の展開にご期待ください。
The entirety of Final Fantasy XIV inside here. That is the goal. The whole MMO, kit and caboodle, gold saucer, fishing, crafting, gathering professions, combat, EXs, savage raiding, all inside here. I don't know, man. So when I first heard about it, look, I gotta give a massive shout out to Lightspeed Studios. They did sponsor us to take a look at this, but they were very much a case of, we want your opinion on this and what you think about what's going to happen. And they actually were really cool, and they sent us a whole bunch of stuff long before it was going to be public to get our thoughts together and think about it and do some research and things like that. And that's where we are today. So massive shout outs to them for being trustworthy enough to be like, hey, we're telling you about this. Here's all the promo material. Here's like interviews with Yoshi P and things like that, long before it was going to be made public knowledge. So we can communicate back and forth and you can be more prepared for a video. So massive shout outs. First of all, why? Why is this happening? Fact of the matter is, and Yoshi P is quite open about this, is mobile is now the #1 gaming platform globally, right? And the fact is, and I've seen this with my children as well, is they start their lives on some sort of mobile device, for the most part, than compared to a lot of us who started on console, or maybe you started on PC, you played on your dad's PC, or whatever it is. In the modern era, people are getting tablets, and they're playing on their parents' phones, and things like that. So mobile is their entryway into gaming, and that is a big problem for the MMO genre, because the MMO genre, while it does exist on mobile, is often a kind of watered down version, and it's also rife often with microtransactions and things like that, and they're generally not built in the way that we consider an MMO as the big social experience. They do have social elements, there's forums and things like that, but often collaboration and teamwork is done through some sort of like organized, but you can kind of solo play, but you're working together. We'll all kind of be around at a certain time, but you can get on with your day-to-day duties and do things. So this makes sense, is if you want to introduce people into the MMO genre, which, as we know, is a thriving genre and is doing very well right now with some huge games coming up, then how are you going to let these people know this is a good idea when they're used to other smaller tablet-based games? You know, typically your Roblox and your Minecraft, and this is why they're going in. The second part about this that Yoshi P mentions as well is many of us share our stories, particularly with FF14's case, of how good this game is. And then it comes with the sort of price tag. Not financially, more the case of, okay, it's about 500 to 600 hours to get up to where you're going to want to be. And even the prospect of doing that in comparison to somebody who's been raised on mobile games is a big problem, right? Because a lot of them are used to maybe literally toilet gaming or very quick gaming on their commute to work or going to school or things like that. And they're just not like aware, even though they may have sunk those hours into some mobile games, as to preparing to take on that responsibility or that pressure of like, hey, yeah, take your time and go through this. And now there's an alternative way of doing it. It's like you can do this now while you're traveling. You can get involved. You can understand what's going on. Let's talk about the potential problems here that were right off the bat and that Yoshi P talks about a little bit. Is, first of all, how is this actually going to work? Right? Because even with console play, which people are very good at with controller that you can use on PC, certainly in 14's case, and other MMOs do support controller now, is there's a lot of functionality with a controller that just does not exist on the mobile platform. So Yoshi P talks about the fact that they're going to be adjusting the jobs specifically, right? They're going to be adjusting the jobs into probably a new version, which is why this is not going to be your current Final Fantasy XIV character. This is a totally separate game that utilizes a different character that is played within the mobile space, because it's not going to work the same as your live character right now. So if you were expecting this to be, oh, I can just log into my character that I have now and I can do sort of my daily quests or my Beast Tribe quests or whatever while I'm on the move, that's not what's going to happen here. This is going to be a totally separate game. It's going to launch with a Realm Reborn, and then they're going to steadily, similar to other games who are releasing their classic versions, are going to be releasing them like at a steady cadence, right? And Yoshi P will talk about that later, is we're going to start off with Realm Reborn, and then Heaven's Ward's going to arrive, and then Stormblood, and so on and so forth, and they're going to adjust that accordingly as to where it goes. But it's important to know this is going to be a different game, and as such, your jobs are likely... Now, one thing they didn't want to show us early is the gameplay. And it's one of the biggest questions I have. Of course it is. One of the biggest questions I have is specifically because Yoshi P is talking about doing some of the X's like they were doing Titan EX. Then how does that work with like moving my character, and then let's say I'm playing a scholar or a sage or something like that, is I need to like click those characters. Do I like click a unit frame and then I click here while also moving with one finger? That I can see making some sort of sense. We've been talking about it internally here with the team for a while, is I could totally foresee a situation where you're kind of moving with one finger and your other finger can sort of set a camera angle, but you can move your character out of any deadly fire on the floor and things like that, while also being able to select things and attack things with a menu that you could probably swap around, and that would actually play reasonably well. But they're very likely we're going to see a condensation of some abilities, or a steady evolution of like when they add more abilities as more expansions arrive, is okay, we need to manage this in some way, but the combat system itself needs to change. Similarly with the UI and menu situation, right? UI and menu is a big topic of conversation in the PC and console versions of Final Fantasy XIV, which do not translate particularly well, in my opinion, to like a mobile phone scenario. So what changes are they going to make there in order to make that more intuitive for a mobile phone situation? Sure, you could just replicate it one for one, and it's like, okay, I've got to go through this menu, this menu, but the screen space is very, very small. And it's going to be a case of like, okay, they need to be readable and legible, and yeah, I can drag and things, but if I need to do things quickly, that's not particularly efficient. And Yoshi P goes into the scenario of explaining that this has actually been the biggest port of call. Other people, as he mentions, have approached them about making mobile MMO. Like, these games exist, right? These games exist, they're made. It's like, can we port them? The storage size seems to be capable of supporting these games now. We'll come back to that in a second. So we should be introducing these games here, because right now the mobile phone market, not entirely, but is mostly flooded by gacha MMOs on their game systems, which are purely designed to try and rope in people in order to spend a ton of money on cosmetics or new heroes, new characters, and things like that. Typically, FF14 has gone the opposite way, is it provides most things, and cosmetics and emotes are bonus content that you can pick up, but generally speaking, everything is already relevant in the game itself. So the UI is one of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to, as I'm sure as you are, when I actually get my hands on the game, which I've been dying to do. Squeenix wouldn't let me to get in there and do that. Let's talk about what we come back to the storytelling. How is this going to work? So in conversations back and forth, it's a case of they want this to be the faithful, incredibly faithful version of Final Fantasy XIV. They want you to have, barring minor adjustments through things like jobs and things like and combat, to have the full Final Fantasy XIV experience on your mobile device. So one of my thoughts that I immediately went to, and I'm sure you guys are as well, is, okay, storytelling. There are many moments when playing through the Final Fantasy XIV's campaign where the game, even though it knows that you are either in a couch or a gaming chair, or you're at home, whatever, will tell you, like, just to let you know, there's some stuff coming up that is going to take a really, really long time. Like, there's going to be a series of cutscenes which might run something like 20 minutes plus that you're not going to want to miss, because it's vital to what's happening in the game. And the foundation of 14 is that storytelling element. How does that work on mobile, right? Because they want to provide that experience. And the answer is, it will work the same. I have to wonder, and I kind of come to you guys as well here, is one, I think that's interesting because mobile typically is for shorter burst play. And Yoshi P even says in his interview that this is going to be a situation where some people can drop in, do fishing, or go and grab some herbs, or maybe run a quick dungeon, things like that, on their way to wherever they may be going. And then you're thinking, right, how do we translate that into, we might have 20 minutes of cutscene for traveling gameplay? And I believe the current theory is that will come down to the user to know what their current situation is and whether or not they're able to fulfill that requirement, which is no different than what is happening when we tell people that at home. Like, some people might just be doing a little bit of story before they go out, or they're getting ready for work, or whatever it might be. And then we let them know, it's like, hey, there's quite a big thing coming up, so you probably want to block out a little bit of time for that. And they're taking the same approach. It's like, yeah, that's not going to work any different, I don't think. It's going to work exactly the same way. It's going to be a case of, oh, there's a huge cutscene coming. Maybe you want to watch that on your dinner break. Maybe you want to watch that on your way home. If you're coming to the end of your journey and you know you don't have enough time to sit through a bunch of cutscenes, even though you want to, is that you'll put them to the side for now, just as you would do with the normal game, and therefore it shouldn't be too much of a big issue. I'd like to see how that's going to play out when I get my hands on the game and try and use it in a more mobile setting. That is my goal when I have access, is to actually use it in my day-to-day commutes and lifestyle, as I would do with mobile games, and see how that translates. Because, of course, MMOs require a ton of investment, and that's not something that doesn't exist on mobile platforms at all. I know some people who've put more hours than I put into Final Fantasy XIV into farming simulators and things like that on mobile, so it's absolutely possible. I just want to see how it feels in comparison to my usual setting of sitting down for a few hours and playing MMOs, which is the way I usually do. The other point I brought up with them, and I'm really curious to see how this will work out, is actually communication. They are going to be including savage raiding, EXs, things like that. Typically, you will want some form of good communication in order to fulfill more difficult content in MMOs. Now, I'm not just talking about voice chat, right? Because there are plenty of people pugging content every single day in these games that don't use voice chat in any way, shape, or form. Some people prefer that. Some people don't. There are even good console MMOs out there that don't have some sort of robust pugging system and actually rely on third-party devices or third-party software in order to enable that functionality to work seamlessly. And it's often not a direct product of the people making the MMOs. The idea, to me, which is something I really want to try, and I'll try and put together a bunch of people for this when this launches, is what is it going to be like? And I assume they're trying to keep everything as same one-for-one as it is in the PC retail version of this game. Of like, am I expecting to say, right, Tuesday night, we are savage raiding, you know, we're going to be in coils, and then booking time out on my phone to do that? Because that usually requires, you know, a couple of hours of investment, which isn't typically what you would do with mobile games in a lot of cases. They're hoping, I believe, and we'll be looking for feedback on this, they're hoping that, yeah, kind of, you'll meet people in-game, because you're all going to be playing the same seamless world, just as you would do with a PC game, right? And also bringing in friends, which is always the way MMOs start to thrive. It's like, I'm going to be trying this MMO, let's level together, let's do this, and you bring in other people, and now you can bring in people who don't have a PC, who don't have a console, or don't have any of those things, is now they can be like, well, you know, do you not have a phone? Yeah, there's 8 billion plus phones on smartphones that are out there in the world right now. Most people do have access to this phone and be like, hey, you can join in with us. Okay, you know, you bill from work or your friend at school or whatever is like, yeah, actually I can totally join in. I don't need an elaborate PC setup. I don't need to take over the TV for a few hours or anything like that. Actually, yeah, I can. Now, I think that's ambitious, to say the least. I think that's ambitious. I actually foresee, and I don't know whether you guys feel the same way, is that realistically, this is probably a gateway for a lot of people to go to the PC version. Of like, if you're having a ton of fun via this thing, doing this content, bro, it's it's a different beast altogether when you crack on with a PC or you crack on with a console and you have it on the big screen and do all those kind of things. And I'll be really curious to see, and this is kind of the feedback that I was sending back, if we were to sort of stick a conclusion on this. For me, I think this is a very noble, ambitious thing. And I don't want it to turn into, yeah, I play on mobile because I love the game, but like my investment is elsewhere. I think if people want to get buried into these characters and enjoy these characters, I have to wonder a couple of things. Are you going to allow people to potentially swap these characters to the live version? I actually suspect no, they won't. They'll keep them entirely separate, but it would be interesting. It's like, you know what? This was my gateway. This device was my gateway to be like, oh, I'm going to try this thing out because actually I've got some hours in now. I'm kind of invested in my character and I want to see it over on the big screen where I can actually fully enjoy it. Let's move over to there. And can I transfer or am I restarting? I suspect you're going to restart, but that would be interesting for me. Are there going to be proper FCs, proper teams, and people who are going to be potentially savage raiding at home, lying in bed, doing whatever, on their mobile device, and doing these things, and progressing, and having fun with it? This already does occur in other mobile MMOs. It does happen. People are doing raid bosses and stuff, but you're certainly talking about, like, scheduling, right, that you'll do with your FC or your static, is you'll regularly schedule times for progress and things like that, because ultimately, as Yoshi P says, they are going to bring this all the way up to date. It will always be behind in some way, so, you know, when the next expansion comes or the latest patch of Dawn Trail comes, it's like that won't be on the on mobile same day or anything like that, but they're very quickly likely to try and get this relatively up to date and see how it works and how it translates. I have a lot of questions. I'm excited because every time I've looked at something for mobile that satiates my gaming needs, it's not been quite hitting the mark as a classic PC gamer. It's just not been there, right? I play console, I play mostly PC, and mobile is, for me, my, say, third tier. That's where I would go third tier. I might play a game on a plane or something like that, but that's about it. It's not my primary go-to. And also, we're in the kind of sphere, and I'm sure many of you are, of being like, well, I'd prefer a Switch or a Stream Deck or something along those lines, and I don't really look at this as a gaming device, but most of the a lot of the planet does. A lot of the planet does. This is going to be spooky. I requested endlessly for gameplay. They're not ready to give it me yet, despite, you know, the preparation we've had here. But either way, this is a pretty exciting time. I've covered everything I've been allowed to show you here. I have many more questions, and I'm sure you do too. So any of your stuff you want to know, outside of what I've brought up here, you let me know down below, and I'll be back to you. All right, guys? Thank you so much. Bye-bye.